Okay. Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. This is my name is Professor Kelsey Coes. We are doing this with Divination Academy, and this is my series on magic and witchcraft basics, and tonight's class is on baneful magic. If you have never been with us here before, with Divination Academy, so glad to have you. So glad that you found us, and I'll give you just a little bit of information about us here before we get going. Um, I'm gonna plop. Plop. That's a funny word. Don't know why I picked that word, but I liked my word choice there. I'm gonna I'm gonna plop three links into the chat for you. The top one is our website. Definitely go and take a peek at that. You get information about our professors, our certification programs, our apprenticeships. You get access to study guides, resource links. Some professors even just put books on there for you. There's just so much information on there for you to just like get your hands on. So definitely go take a look at it. Our YouTube page is a second link. That is where majority of our classes, they get recorded and they get posted to. I think we have like 140 different classes to check out. Definitely go and check them out. We have lots of topics like herbalism, Enochian magic. We have tarot. We have classes on the Jinn, on the Fae, Norse mythology, like so many topics. So please just like look through the whole page to find something that just screams to your soul. And then the last link that we have there is our Facebook page. That is where if you are not an enrolled student right now watching with us, send us a DM. That is how you get enrolled. When you get enrolled, you get access to our private Facebook group. You get access to our community chats. You get access to actually being able to have a student page on the website, to do the certification programs, to do the private apprenticeships and things like that. So send us a DM, get in contact with us that way. You get access to so much more. It's just worth it. And we're free. We'll never ask you for anything. So there's really no reason not to. The next disclaimer that I have is just a little bit about me. So my name is Professor Kelsey Coes. I am located here in central Minnesota. I am a solitary practitioner. I have been for about 15 plus years. Prior to this, I did a bunch of other things. I was a Christian missionary for a while, so I've been all over the place with a lot of different religions and a lot of different practices. Um, my magic is very ritualistic, ceremonial. I'm considering myself a mystic and a great practitioner. So again, I look from everywhere. Another disclaimer about tonight, right off the bat. If you are going to be disrespectful in the chat, if you're going to gatekeep in the chat, if you're going to say in the chat that you are not to do any baneful magic at all, or that it's evil or negative or bad, and that's the purpose of why you're here in this class isn't for you. That's not how I'm teaching this class. That's not how this class is going to be taught. This class is going to be taught to use baneful magic, to accept baneful magic. We're going to go through the morality of witchcraft and magic tonight. So there is going to be, a little bit of controversial topics talked about tonight, and you have to when you talk about baneful magic. So I do want to preface that we do need to be respectful, like even if we disagree, like no name calling, no gatekeeping, no being hurtful. We need to be respectful in the chat. Admins are going to be watching that, so if anything does happen, that gets taken care of right away. I did want to make sure we had that disclaimer tonight because, again, this topic is a controversial topic in the witchcraft, pagan, and magic world. And I am going to be teaching it not from a place of gatekeeping, but from a place of like, we need to embrace this and we need to be using this for multiple reasons. Paul, I love your I love your emojis. Katie, oh, I saw in the chat. You're welcome to the study guide. I love making them. You guys know I do. Okay, fabulous. So we're gonna jump right on in. If you need the study guide link, it is up below, up above. If you missed it, if you don't, I hope somebody can drop it in for you guys because I'm gonna jump into the study guide and we're gonna get going. Okay, so what we are going to be starting on is really actually the definitions of baneful magic. We're also going to talk about the difference between black and baneful magic because they're actually not the same. They get interwoven a lot and they shouldn't be. They actually are different things and different concepts. So I'm going to make sure to create that distinction as well for you. We're going to jump in then to the morality of baneful magic, the morality of magic and witchcraft as a whole, and then we'll get into types of baneful magic, how to do them. I also have a little bit of protection in here. Not a lot though. I taught 2 entire classes on protection. I have like a 157-page study guide for you guys. If you want information on protection, you can watch those classes, you can do those study guides, and you can also always DM me if you have any other questions about that. So when we go into baneful magic, I'm going to be very, very clear right here from the beginning. I was in the disclaimer as well. Banishing, binding, cursing, hexing. A lot of people consider these forms of witchcraft baneful, which implies that these practices are inherently harmful, and that we should avoid these types of workings instead. And they only focus on blessings and light magic and light and love. And I don't agree with that. I'm going to be right from the front. I don't agree with that. That is not how I agree with it. That's not how I see it. I, however, see baneful spells and spirits as an absolute necessary part to witchcraft as a whole. I think that denying it is absolutely dangerous to you. It's dangerous to the universe. It's dangerous to society. It's dangerous to energy. It's just, that's how I view it. That's how I see it. If you have a completely different view, that's totally fine. That's the whole point of morality in witchcraft. And everybody's gonna, figure that out on their own, but that is how I'm teaching it. That is how I view it. And I want to be very clear about that from the beginning. Before we go any further, does anybody have any questions before we go any further on that? Or if Paul wants to jump in, because I know he was itching for this class tonight. Fabulous. And I needed to drink some root beer. I promise that's root beer. I don't even drink alcohol. I promise that's root beer. Okay, so definitions of baneful magic. So, like I said before, first, baneful magic and black magic, they're often interwoven and super misunderstood. Some people consider them mutually exclusive. Can they overlap? Absolutely. Absolutely, they can overlap, but they're not mutually exclusive. They're not interwoven, interchangeable ideas. Most baneful magic is black magic, but not all black magic is baneful magic, and not all baneful magic is black magic. Some baneful magic is also white magic. White magic can also be used in a baneful way. If you look at magic black versus white, personally, I don't. So I'm teaching it this way tonight to try to make it, because that's how a lot of people see it. Personally, I see magic as energy. I see it all as gray. We'll talk about that a little later, but a lot of people separate it as black and white. But I'm just saying, like, if you view it that way, white magic can be used in a baneful way as well. I'm going to talk about that in detail later too, but it can be. So that's also why that definition doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. The main difference is black magic is typically performed with the intent to release or remove with harm to none done, whereas baneful magic is generally performed with the intent to harm someone else or to impose free will or to take away somebody's free will. There are also other definitions of baneful magic. The most accepted one is baneful magic is a magic with the intent to do harm, also to change the outcome of someone else's free will. Other versions of baneful magic that I hear other people use it as, and I've seen it written as, and I see some writers and some teachers describe it as, some people consider baneful magic any magic that has workings to do with the shadow. Some people consider baneful magic anything that has to do with dark deities. Some people consider baneful magic anything that has to do with any type of taboo topic to society. So sex magic, some people consider that baneful. Some people consider working with certain entities baneful, like some people consider working with the Fae as baneful, or the Jinn, or working with any type of demons, or even mirror magic, some people consider baneful. So honestly, like the entire list could be endless of what some people consider baneful and like what the actual definition is. But the most accepted, like I said before, is baneful magic is magic with the intent to do harm or to change the outcome of someone else's free will or to impose your free will onto somebody else. I personally believe that this misconception with black magic versus angel magic and like why they get confused and why we have to do all this like separation between the two is because of threefold law, which we'll talk about more because unfortunately we can't not touch on that law while touching about baneful magic, the patriarchy because of deities and shadow work and so many other reasons that it all just kind of got meshed into one because they're like, nah, don't touch it, don't be by it, we don't want you near it. Traditionally, black magic was actually magic that was used to hurt or manipulate another person. And white magic was used for good purposes. So if you want to really go back to a super traditional sense, traditionally that's the way that it was viewed. Again, I don't view it now. I don't agree with that now. I'm going to jump back into the chat quick just to see if there's anybody that has any questions before we jump into ethics and the definitions. Honey, yeah, I was excited Paul was going to be in this one. Because Paul always has extra information to teach me that I love. I know he's here as a student, but I also love when he teaches me more information. Or when any of you teach me more information. I always leave with fun new tidbits. Honey's really good at doing that to me. Honey's super good at making me have to go look up extra stuff. And I love it. Okay, I'm going to jump back in then because I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands raised. Fabulous. Hopefully I'm doing okay. And if I'm talking too fast, please just unmute yourself. Tell me to slow down. I know sometimes I can get like that, especially on topics I'm really passionate about. So it might happen tonight. So when we're looking at ethics of baneful magic, and honestly magic in general, baneful magic is probably one of the most hotly debated topics and subjects in witchcraft. Ethics and morality get mentioned a super great deal around this. And usually it ends up with all parties admitting that ethics and morality are super, super critical aspect to determining whether or not baneful magic should be used. And the practitioner, the witch, usually everybody ends up with their own different definition. You usually end up deciding on your own ethics of baneful magic through meditation, through shadow work, through your own morality, your moral compass. I'm going to go through a lot of different ways about how we do that too for you if you do still need to work and figure out how you feel about this topic. When the subject of baneful magic comes up, a lot of common things that I hear, a lot of common declarations that I hear range from, no, you should never, ever, ever hex somebody. You should never curse somebody. You should never bind somebody. Or it's way too dangerous to do that. How could you ever do that? You need to be practicing for this many amount of years. You need to be a high priestess in this coven for this long. Or a witch who cannot hex cannot heal. Or witches who do not hex are not real witches. So like I hear so many different things around this that are just honestly ridiculous. I'm gonna be super blunt. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Because in witchcraft and paganism and occultism and all these alternate spiritualities that this comes up in, like the whole part of this path is like you get to pick and choose and decide what speaks to your soul, what's part of your path to. So to try to say gatekeeping things like that is just it's just ridiculous, and that's not what this path is meant to be about. It's not what it's a part of. I'm going to break down a couple and tell you like why I really don't like them and why they really bother me. One that I really, really don't like and I feel it's really important to touch on because as somebody who uses this magic, I hear a lot of people who use baneful magic and support it and like they don't fight it. This is what they use and I don't like this for this reason. So a witch who cannot hex cannot heal. This is really tough for me because I do agree with the principle of it mostly, but it's super, 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 super oversimplified. Yes, I totally agree with the fact that you need to understand how to heal something. You need to understand like how to act, how the harm was actually caused. You need to understand like in order to create, you need to understand how something can be destroyed. Like I totally get that. I totally understand that. I totally agree with that. But what this doesn't talk about and what this leaves out, and I think what ends up causing some witches, especially new into neo-paganism and trying to go down this route, to start just cursing everybody for no reason and hexing people for literally just random things, just because they want to know how it works and know how to do it, is because it leaves out that just because you know how to do something and just because you have the knowledge to do something doesn't mean that you should. It doesn't mean that that is always the right choice. It doesn't mean that that's where you jump to, and it doesn't mean that that's where you go to. Having the knowledge and actually using it are very, very, very different things. Very, very different things. The analogy that I have in the study guide, which I think just works really, really well, is like I have so many cleaning supplies in my house. I'm OCD, so I have way more than most people. I clean like crazy. I could easily go study down to the T, the chemistry of how to be able to make explosive compounds out of all the household chemicals in my house. I would have the knowledge. I would have the know-how. I would know how to do it. Does that mean that I'm going to? Does it mean that I'm ever actually going to do it? Does it mean that I'm actually going to go and use those chemicals to blow up somebody else's house or mine? No, I'm not going to do that. So that is why I don't like that one. And it really leaves that out. And I think that that really, really matters. And especially with Baneful Magic. I am a practitioner with it. I use it. I love it for so many reasons. But just because I know how to use it doesn't mean that that's the first thing I go to. It doesn't mean I do this all the time. It doesn't mean that you should do it all the time. You really, really have to evaluate when and why you are using it. I have a whole section later that we're going to talk about with that too. Okay, I'm going to jump back in the chat before we go on to the next one. That's funny. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we go on to the next topic that we got to talk about with the morality part of it? I don't see anything. Fabulous. Hopefully I'm doing okay.
Um,
Go
I,
ahead, Paul.
I, I, I do, if I may.
Yes. And that's
Um,
what you wanted to touch on, I think.
yeah. I am famous for saying, cure before you curse, heal before you hate. However, I always put the nuance in there that sometimes healing in itself can be a hex, just as curing can be a hex. And the example I've given in the past, and the example I'm going to use in this case, was somebody I know who is a witch had a problem with a family member drinking, heavily drinking, to the point of alcoholism. And along with it came the physical and mental abuse. And they tried to cure them of this alcoholism. They tried to heal them of this alcoholism. Well, as a direct result, that person 3 days later was involved in a fatal car accident where they ran the car literally off the side of a mountain. Nobody else was hurt. However, they were fixed. They were no longer addicted to alcohol. They were no longer an alcoholic. So both of them in themselves have their own nuance, which I think is an important thing. And again, it becomes that morality issue of, was that the right thing to do to try to influence somebody else? And did the universe answer, or was that just fate? So, I mean, I'm famous. No doubt people here in the chat have heard me say, cure before you curse, heal before you head, just before you jinx. Um, but there's always a morality and a duality involved in that, which I think is often overlooked. And I'm glad you're actually covering it because it's a very, very important nuance that needs to be covered. So thank you.
Yes, honestly, the study got ended up so much longer than I thought because I went into that. I'm like, nope, I can't stop. Like, I have to make sure we go over all of this. There's actually going to be a part two for Baneful Magic. I wasn't planning on until I finished the study guide because there's quite a few topics I didn't get into. But I wanted to make sure we really, really covered the morality of this because it's so important. So important. Okay, next one. I'm gonna be really, really blunt right off the top. I have a severe disdain for the law of three. If this is your path, I understand it. I understand wanting to have that guiding ethical framework. I totally get it. But I personally disdain this, and I disdain what this law has done in the witchcraft community. I place a lot of blame on this for why people don't use baneful magic, why I'm having to tread so lightly sometimes with how I talk and how I speak about it, and why it's so controversial and such a hot topic. Again, this is if it's your personal path. Again, I respect that. I totally understand that. That's the whole part of being pagan, and I get why, and I get the allure of it. I totally understand it. For me though, like this is personally how I feel about it. This is how I'm going to be teaching it. So like I said, in our current climate of witchcraft, you cannot talk about hexing and cursing without talking about the law of three or the threefold law. Try to go do it on Facebook and see what happens. Try to go talk about cursing and hexing and watch to see if this doesn't get thrown at you. So exactly what it means, Paul can actually give you the exact page it's on. He told me earlier, which is fabulous. But the exact meaning varies depending on who is interpreting it, but the general overall variation of what most people accept is whatever you put out there will return to you in threefold. Um, my big issue with this is that people who typically believe this, and I'm saying again, I'm saying typically, not all. Typically, they like to tout this as an absolute universal truth, that it affects everybody and anybody, regardless of whether you choose to pay attention to it or not, whether you actually practice it or not, whether you're Wiccan or not, because this is a very Wiccan view. And just because you're pagan, just because you're witch, doesn't mean you're Wiccan. There's a lot of people who aren't. So that also gets thrown in there, which makes it a big, huge issue. I personally, for so many reasons, don't believe in this law. I think it's egotistical. It doesn't energetically make sense. It doesn't karmically make sense. It doesn't universal law make sense. I literally could do a whole TED talk on this, to be honest. I just don't agree with this. This just clearly, it's not how the world works. If everything that you did came back to you in threefold, we wouldn't have these untouchable dictators. We wouldn't have these untouchable billionaires. We wouldn't have crime bosses. We wouldn't have people abusing other people because things would be coming back to them in threefold what they're doing out there. The world is also full of super amazing, kind people that do amazing, kind, compassionate things for their fellow humans, and you don't see them getting that back. It's just very clear in front of you that that's not how the world works. I don't like this philosophy. I don't like how it sits here and tries to tell you that you can only ever do good things, so you can't do baneful magic. I do not agree with this philosophy. This is how I'm teaching this. If we want to discuss this now, we can. Go ahead, guys. I'm gonna go back to chat. If there's anything anybody wants to say, this is just like this is the morality on it for me. This is how I teach it. This is how I'm going to teach it. This is how I do it. So if anybody wants to unmute or say anything, go ahead. You can totally go for it. Again, remember to be respectful if you disagree.
I absolutely agree with you.
I like to hear that. I like to hear that. That's going to be what I'm going to say on that one.
Okay, I guess it's time for me to do my little
Go for it,
piece.
Paul.
Okay, now when it comes to, and I'm going to be very specific here, but before you jump down my throat, anyone, I'm happy to debate this, but I am going to take it as part of the Wiccan Creed. Okay, now as we know, Wicca is a religion that was created by a gentleman by the name of Gerald Gardner. The rule of three comes from a book that he wrote in 19
54.
Yes, 1954, I think it was.
Just unmuting
was either
myself to say that.
it was either 53 or 54, and that book was called High Magick's Aid. Now, if you ever get chance to read High Magick's Aid, go ahead and do it because it's a really good book. But you have to understand the premise behind the book. In 1953 or 1954, the practicing of witchcraft in England was a crime. It was not repealed until 1955 when it was replaced with a Mystics Act. So when he wrote this book as a book of fiction in air quotes. Everybody knew what it was for, but it was set in the premise of a book of fiction. And the actual wording for the rule of three goes, mark well when thou receivest good, so equally art bound to return good threefold. Now, when you read it, and it's on page 188, I talked about this so many times I can recite the page, and I think it's like the third or fourth paragraph down on the page. Now, when he's talking about this, he's talking about it in the context of witches. He's not talking about it in the term of people outside of witchcraft. Okay. And the rule of three, when it comes to positive, is if there is a member of the witchcraft community that has done good and is looking for assistance, your responsibility as a witch is to bless, help, or aid them as an agent of the threefold response. Now, the other side of that, which he goes on to later, is if you're hurt by a witch, you should hex, curse, or smite them. So the rule of three actually encourages you to hex, curse, and smite. If you are done wrong by another witch, you should return it threefold with a hex, a curse, and a smite. So when people quote the rule of three, they're misquoting, they're not expressing the correct context, and they're not looking at the history of where it comes from in Wicca. Now, if you want to take it pre-Wicca, then you look to Druidism, and you also look to Christianity. Why do you look to Christianity? Because of the trifecta: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They all come in threes. That is where Gerald Gardner, and he even explains it in some of his letters to Lovecraft, who was also a member of Gerald Gardner's coven. This is where the inspiration for it came from. It came from Christianity and Druidism. But to say the rule of three only promotes good, when it clearly states in the book to hex, curse, and smite, is a fallacy. I've said my piece. I'm going to shut up now.
I love it, Paul. Thank you so much. It's actually gonna make me look at a couple things a little bit differently. Um, with it, I'm gonna relook at a couple things with it because I want to look at that a little bit more. So thank you for bringing that up. I really, really, really appreciate that a lot. I do still kind of like see how it can be kind of egotistical though still because it's saying like witches are gonna have separate karma than other people, kind of is how I kind of heard that from you. But we can talk about it later too. Otherwise we can keep going here. People want to keep hearing it. But and honey, your thing too. That's kind of how I look at it too. Because even if you look at it karma, like I totally understand that sometimes you get energy back worse due to like unknown unseen things. Like I understand that with the karma part of it. But like you said there too, like it doesn't like to me it just doesn't balance it out. It ends up being so imbalanced. But Paul, I absolutely love what you just said, and I'm actually gonna be reading that right after we're done here, to be honest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I super appreciate it.
Yeah, it starts off on page 188, and then I think it's the either the chapter after or two chapters after where he mentions hex, curse, and smite
Yeah,
with
I'm gonna
regards to the
go.
rule of
Okay,
with regards to an injustice performed to oneself by another witch.
I am
And
the
if
witch.
it's a
Typically,
and
yeah.
if it is a coven, a classical coven of 11, then that rule would apply to 33 because it is three for each of the witches.
Makes sense. That makes
Well,
sense.
I totally get that, and I understand it's for witches, but I still feel as though that it's not for everybody, and I think you get hit with it more so if you do it when it's not when you're going after somebody when you shouldn't be. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, I know what you mean. I get what you're saying with that. But then again, that also comes up to morality too, and everybody's going to have their own personal morality of what you should and shouldn't be doing to somebody. So, like, everybody's got to figure out their own morality on that part too, because, one person may say that, if somebody, cuts you off in traffic, you're justified to jinx them. And another person may say, well, no, you're not justified to do that. And some
Well,
people may say, so that also plays into it too.
well, I meant something more like not something so trivial like that. I meant something more like hurting you or stealing from you, hurting you physically or
Oh yeah.
spiritually. Then or if you was to do it for someone cutting you off in traffic and then you do it, then you get hit 3 times as hard. You know what I mean?
I mean, I could see that perspective, but then again, yeah, I can totally understand that, how some people can see that. I totally get that. Again, though, that again, it's going to be everybody's morality is going to be different. Some people are going to think it's totally okay to do something to somebody who cuts you off in traffic, and other people are going to think that it's not okay to use it until abuse or something super, super, super severe is involved. So what if that person because you also have to look at that situation. So what if that person that cut you in traffic, cut you off, almost caused you to go off the road into a lamppost and your son was in the back seat? That may change circumstances for you. It may change circumstances for somebody else. It may not change circumstances. So that's where the whole morality plays into, and everybody's morality is going to be different when it comes to when to use baneful magic.
True.
Because I mean, to be fair, like if somebody almost like killed me and my child in a car, like yeah,
Oh yeah,
I
I'm
might be a
with
little
you on that.
bit upset.
I'm with you on that.
So
My
that's where
kid,
the whole morality comes in, and that's where it comes to the not gatekeeping anybody, because everything's going to be subjective.
yeah,
I,
that's true.
I have to add to your example, Kelsey.
Yes.
So say for instance, right, the person that you wanted to hex, that you had your kid in the car, you almost hit a light post, was on their way to save someone that was in a burning house and et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And then you go to hex them, and then spirit's like, whoa, hold up, no. And then that's when I think it's circumstantial, right?
Yep.
And there's that piece. And there's also too, like, I think about myself as a Capricorn, and I'm ruled by Saturn and all that good stuff. So I know that when I mess up, that I've never bought into the rule of three, but I know that karma for me is gonna come fast. So that's when I say that I always ask spirit first, even if it's like healing, even if it's anything, right? Because it's like everything's circumstantial.
1,000%. That's why I have a whole section on how to evaluate and what you need to make sure you're looking at, which we'll go over now because we've really, really talked about moral relativism. And I have a whole thing in the study guide for you guys to go over.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
So we've all that. Do you want to have more to say for this topic before we go to the next one?
No, I'm just sorry to hold you up.
No, you're not. No, 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 no. You're not holding us up at all. Do not. No, 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 no. I was just saying we've already talked about it all, so I don't need to go over it in the study guide. No, you are totally fine. This is exactly what I wanted. Is I wanted you guys to discuss things and bring things up that you wanted to talk about. So you are totally fine, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Never apologize for that. So now we're talking about, since we're kind of getting into this, intended and unintended consequences. They also matter. Like you have to pay attention to that. Like Melissa was just bringing up. I believe that was Melissa. Yes, she has that new picture I saw. I remember that from study group. So you have to think about that. So one of the skills that you need to develop is the ability to be able to predict your consequences of your magical actions. And that's really, really going to be prudent when it comes to using baneful magic. So you need to be able to understand and have a fairly good idea of potential fallout of any spell that you perform when it comes in, especially with baneful magic. It's a skill that like you end up picking up, you just kind of harness, you kind of learn. But because you need to be aware of intended consequences that may be coming back at you and unintended consequences that may be coming back at you. Because there's also the part to where I personally believe, yes, intention is a factor. I'm not saying intention doesn't matter, it doesn't play a factor, but an impact is more important than intention. You may have intended, like Paul's story earlier, you may have intended to do something with the absolute best intentions, but your impact was detrimental. That impact matters more. It's like the analogy of somebody can run my foot over accidentally with a car and apologize, but if they run my foot over with a car again and apologize, like I'm not going to accept it for one, because like the impact, like what the heck? Like you may run my foot over with a car and apologize, but my foot's still broken. It still hurts. Like the impact matters more than the intent that like you didn't mean to do that. So yes, intent, like I said, I'm not going to say intent doesn't matter. It has no meaning, no meaning whatsoever, because it does. But the impact, especially in this type of work, the impact matters more. Like to me, like I believe this. If you disagree, I'll hop in the chat in a little bit. We can talk about it. But I fully believe like the impact matters more because yeah, like again, intention does matter. But you can have the best of intentions, and your impact can be completely detrimental. And that's also another morality thing. So keep that in mind too. So yeah, go ahead.
Believe me, a broken foot hurts.
I I haven't had one. My son has, so I can imagine.
I have one, and I think I broke it again, so I can contest how much it hurts.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's not fun. I hope it heals better fast for you.
That's a whole nother story.
Oh, okay. So back to the unintended and unintended consequences. So you need to make sure that you're aware of both that are possibly going to be coming, of all that are going to be coming to you. They can be something that's super big, something that's super small and mundane. How to kind of counteract that is to understand that like no action is 100% good and no action is 100% bad. Like that's fully how I believe. Some people believe differently, and if you have a completely different belief, that is okay. But when I'm working with Baneful magic, that's how I see it, is no action is actually 100% good. No action is 100% bad. I don't believe in this harm none. It logically it's not possible. Paul's story is an absolute great example of that. I'm actually really happy he showed that and he shared that. I believe that the way that you can be the most ethical and the most ethical goal in your spell work, even in Baneful work, is that you want to try to minimize harm to maximize the benefit. So whether you're doing normal spells or Baneful spells, you want to make sure that you are doing, as minimal harm as you possibly can while maximizing your benefit. And if you mess up, if you make a mistake, if you cause unintended harm, you need to own it, you need to apologize for it, and you need to take all possible steps that you can to make amends and to help fix that mistake or fix that unintended harm, that unintended consequences that you brought onto somebody else. So if that happens, like I said, you need to own up to it. You need like with those unintended consequences, like you need to own up to it. Try to plan for as many as you possibly can, but you still need to own up to it if something happens and do your best to make amends. When doing other Baneful magic, in order to minimize your harm and maximize your benefit, you need to also always carefully evaluate what, why, and how. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And how are you going to be doing it? In order to be responsible and engaging with Baneful magic, usually they're done in a response to harm. Usually they're used to help those who are downtrodden or marginalized. Usually they're used to help those fight back, to hold individuals and institutions accountable. So in order to responsibly engage in that, you need to make sure that you answer what, why, and how, so that you are using the correct Baneful magic. You are using it when it should be used and for the intention and reason for why it should be used. It is an incredibly effective tool for you to have in your toolkit for you to be using. It's not friendly, but when it's needed, it is super, super, super beneficial. It's super, super important. But you need to evaluate those three things of why you're going to be using it, how you're going to be using it, and what you're going to be doing. How to evaluate whether or not to do Baneful magic. Each time, if you feel drawn to it, it's important to do an absolute full evaluation, like I've just emphasized like 4 times. The main reason is because each situation is going to be different. We've already covered that in like a couple of different examples here. Each situation is going to be different. Each circumstance is going to be different. It's all going to be circumstantial depending on what's going on and what's around you. I also want to say that when it comes to evaluating whether or not to do it, I don't agree with. You need to be doing this for an X amount of years. You need to be, like I said, certain level in a coven or a high priestess or have studied all of these different things. I don't agree with that. Do I agree that you need to do research? You need to know what you're doing. You need to be educated. You need to have some basics in grounding and understanding your energy. You need to do the evaluation of why you're doing it. Yes. Some people it comes super naturally to do. That's how magic works. But witchcraft, magic, there's not this set time frame. There's not this set pattern. It's going to move. It's going to flow how you need it to. Just, I don't, like I said, to evaluate whether or not to do it, I don't think that there should be like a time frame or anything like that or anything like that. You just need to make sure that you do evaluate it every time. Every time you feel a pull to do it, you need to evaluate if you're going to do it. If you think you're going to do it, you need to evaluate. That's when you evaluate if you're going to do it. Every single time. You also need to follow your intuition. You need to follow your heart. You need to trust in your spirit guides. You need to contact your spirit guide, your ancestors, your ascended masters, whoever it is that you work with. If you work with deities, you need to also be prepared to engage in shadow work. It is a super, super good idea to do shadow work, especially around the people or the events that are prompting that baneful magic. You need to figure out how it's actually personally affecting you. That's going to be able to decide, like, is baneful magic actually needed? Is it actually needed yet? Is it something that's actually needed? If you're doing this to avoid toxic behaviors, if you're doing this to avoid abuse, things like that, I agree with it. Right away, I'm going to say it, I agree with it. But still be prepared to do shadow work just to make sure that like there's not something else that can be done. There's not possibly, anything that needs to be happening with mental health. There's not any other type of magic or spell works that can be used in this situation before you go down this road. When it comes to accurate evaluation of asking of what, you need to be able to actually look back and determine what are the actual circumstances prompting you to do this. Very specifically, what are the circumstances prompting you? Is somebody being harmed? And if they are, who is being harmed? And in how, in what ways, and how are they being harmed? Where exactly is the harm coming from? Are there non-magical ways to solve the situation? Would it be worth the effort to add magic to increase the odds? Is it worth my energy? All of that. You need to determine all of that and that what. All of that. What are the circumstances? What is actually prompting this? When it comes to evaluating your motivations, which is the why. The motivations is the why you're doing this. When you're asking why, you really, really need to ask, like, what are the actual motivations? Are you using this for revenge? Are you using this to get back at somebody? Are you using this to protect somebody? Are you using this for retribution? Is this all about your ego? Is it all about self-gratification? Are you trying to reclaim your personal power? Are you dealing with trauma? Are you trying to empower others who have been victimized or marginalized? Is it a combination of multiple of these things? Do you not know the answer yet? Because if you don't, and you don't know why, probably a good time to stop right here. You haven't fully evaluated. Go back, do some shadow work, think of what, and then come back and try to reevaluate the why. Or it simply may be baneful magic isn't what the situation is going to call for. The next step is the what you want to accomplish. So what exactly do you want to make happen through your magical efforts? Very specifically, what exactly do you want to happen? Are there any other real world steps that you can take? Are there any other non-magical steps that you can take? Is it a mental health thing that can happen? Is it that you can actually get legal help involved if need be? Do you need the police involved? Is there something else that can happen before this happens? Is there an added benefit to conducting that baneful magic? And are your intentions reasonable to the response of what has happened or is happening? So those are all the things that you need to look at. Depending upon the circumstances, you may understand exactly what has happened. You may have a completely clear answer. If you don't do any of these questions, In these situations, I'm super fun on calling on the fates, the multiverse, the Akashic records, deities of justice. I will do shadow work. I will do divination, all those things to help me accurately evaluate if baneful magic is something that I really, really need to be doing. Also, more study and research as well. When it comes to baneful spell work, this is not the opinion of everybody across the board when it comes to baneful spell work. I am in the opinion that baneful magic spells should have a natural out or ending, which means that the spell actually does dissolve. It actually does have an ending. I don't like that, like for baneful magic to be like this unending, never-ending thing. It makes the spell more resistant to being banished or undone. It also reinforces any unintended outcomes. And what like a natural out or ending like really, really means is that like it how do I explain this? It means that like you accomplish the goal of the spell. Like it means that however that it ended, it's directly related to whatever the goal of that spell was. I think that's the best way that I can phrase that. Like, okay, so for an example, if it's related to like abusive behavior. So if you do some type of, binding or banishing or freezer spell for somebody who's been abusive to you, I don't believe that that should be an absolutely unending thing. I feel like it should end when the individual grows, learns, make amends, no longer is abusing, has resolved to stop abusive behavior. If they've gone through addiction treatment and they need to because that was the cause, if they've gone through therapy, if they've really fully, completely changed and stopped that behavior, I feel like I believe that spell should have its natural ending. It's done. Like it has been completed. The goal has been accomplished. I don't feel somebody should be continuously punished for that. I don't believe that. Everybody, and again, everybody has their different views. If you believe differently, that is totally fine. This is going to be something you're going to have to sit with when it comes to your own personal morality on this topic as well. When it comes to baneful magic, and how you want it to end, if you want it to end, and how you want that to work. So I'm gonna jump back in the chat, see if anybody has any questions or anybody else they need to say at all. I see hand Paul, go ahead.
Okay. When you were talking about different ways of discovery and different types of conversation, be that with spirit or with divination or so on and so forth. Um, One thing we have to be, and again, I'm talking from a personal standpoint here. One thing to be really careful of is ego.
Yes.
Ego has a way of getting in the way of things. Like, for instance, if you're doing scrying and you get symbology, are there two ways of looking at the symbology that you're seeing? Or is it just a very direct message? So, like you say, and I'm I'm kind of different in that in the past I was very gung ho because that's the way I was taught within the collective that I was with. And now I have a new viewpoint, which is it justified? Can I justify it? If the justification and the reasoning is there, then yes. If not, if I can't justify it and give reason for the justification, then it doesn't happen. We can all, get that hot flash of anger and, oh, I hate this person, therefore I'm going to do this. Ha ha ha. I'm going to be the evil magician. I'm going to be the evil mage. Yes, you could do that, but then what are the repercussions? Like you say, the impact and the intent are very, very important. Um, and also I've always said, if you're going to be doing baneful magic and it can't wait a week, while you think about things and analyze things, and like you say, do the work that's involved, then you probably don't need to be doing baneful magic in the first place. Take a couple of days to mull it over. As you say, talk to spirit, do your divination work, do your card pulls, whatever you've got to do before you go ahead and do it. Because, you know, it can energetically be exhausting to do
Oh,
this kind of
yes.
work. I
Yes.
mean, literally, you can set into motion things that, yes, okay, typically your body reacts anyway to any kind of energy work, be that getting hot, be that getting cold, be that getting hyper, be that getting into the state in order to be able to do the working you're dealing with. So, be that ecstasy, anger, um, secretive, hidey type stuff. You have to get your mindset in there. And when you're doing, and this again is just me talking from personal experience, when you do baneful work, it's not going to be the same as other work. You are going to feel it for longer. And
Agreed.
that's just my personal, in the past when I've done baneful work or when I'm doing baneful work, it affects me for a longer period of time. Sometimes, I can be over a magical working within a couple of hours. Normally, if I'm doing baneful stuff, I'm talking a couple of days minimum.
Yep. I had the same experience, Paul. I had the exact same experience.
But I guess the point I'm trying to get across is if you are doing that communication, if you are doing that investigation, please be free of ego when you're doing it. And that's why doing the shadow work is important to it. Because if you don't know the shadow self and the reason behind it, then, hey, you're responsible for your own workings, people.
I totally agree with you. And I had the same thing. I went through a phase where I was like you, where I was like, I'm gonna hex and yeah. I went through that phase too. I know exactly what you're talking about. Okay, let's see. Oop, do I see another? Honey, go ahead.
So, question about the leaving it open-ended. That makes a lot of sense that you don't want to leave it open-ended to go on forever and ever and ever. But at the same time, depending how would you determine a certain outcome? Like if it was someone abusive and just as I'm just using this as an example, right? Like you did. If someone is drinking a lot and they're abusive because of that, so they go into rehab for alcoholism, but their abuse keeps up. So they did what they needed to do to stop for the baneful to end, for the spell to end, but their abuse hadn't. So depending on so my point is, how would you know what kind of ending for the spell to have other than just when they stop being mean, you stop.
Okay. So I kind of think you answered your own question, and I don't think you realized that you kind of did it. So I'm gonna point it out to you a little bit. So I think what you said is that the purpose, like you wanted to do baneful magic to stop them from being abusive to you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They were being abusive because of alcoholism and they got treatment for alcoholism, correct?
They
That's what you're
well,
saying. That's what you said in this example, though. Like they went and they got treatment for alcoholism.
yeah,
Okay.
but
But then they
after
came back and then they were still abusive, correct?
yes,
Okay. So with all of that timeline there, the baneful
mm-hmm.
magic wouldn't stop just because they went and got treatment and for the addiction of alcoholism because you did the baneful work to stop the abuse. And the abuse is still going. So that spell would still naturally be open, even though they went and did the treatment because they came back and they're still being abusive. They didn't actually fulfill what that baneful spell you intended for it to fulfill. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So by having an ending or outcome, you're not necessarily meaning like a certain thing that they have to do. Like, for lack of a better example, like don't do 5 Hail Marys and you're all good. You actually,
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
actually have to do the work.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think, did Paul unmute himself? I think Paul might have wanted to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did unmute myself because I just can't resist. Um, I I think you're going to cover this, so I'm only going to briefly mention this.
Yep.
Not magic. I see by the nod that you are going to cover this.
Yeah. It'll be in the
Okay.
next class. It'll be in the next class, but I will.
Oh, okay.
If you want to touch on it now, you totally can.
Okay. So with things like binding, I mean, okay, if we're going to talk about binding,
Because we're going to talk about binding, but I'm doing a really basic overview of it. I wanted to do not magic way more intensely. So go for it.
okay, with binding, it's kind of like cord cutting.
Hmm.
There are a million and one different ways to do it. And the
Yep.
problem is, everybody says, my way is the right way. You have to use a black candle and you have to use a white candle. And you don't let the flame burn the cord, you cut the cord with iron scissors. Yada, 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 yada. You know, there are a million and different ones. But I think this comes down to what you were saying earlier, Kelsey, about the impact. The impact of your working has a direct reflection on them and their outcome, and that outcome therefore reflects how, when, where, why it ends. For instance, if you're dealing with somebody who's a narcissist, do you deal with somebody with a bind? Do you deal with somebody with a curse? Do you deal with, narcissism is a psychological trait
Mm-hmm.
that takes a lot of work. And
Mm-hmm.
you pay, I've
Go ahead.
never
I'm sorry, Paul.
I've never been successful with a narcissist because they are constant work. You can bind, you can freeze, you can jinx, you can go to the ends of the earth and back until they are ready to make that adjustment. No amount of your will influence that person. And I'm talking specifically about narcissists because it's frustrating. And coming from somebody who has tried and 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 tried, at the end of the day, you just have to set the intent and the impact to be when this behavior changes to a positive note, it will end. Until then, I'm sorry, it is what it is. It was justified. I'm responsible. I'm aware of my actions and I'm aware of the repercussions of my actions because when you're trying to influence behavior, there are more often than not repercussions that come further down the line. It goes back to my alcoholism example. Well, yeah, the problem was solved because the problem wasn't there anymore. The person wasn't there anymore. I'm not trying to say it's all about severe, extreme outcomes. Sometimes just one day of relief a week would be great. An hour of relief in some cases would be great. Set your expectations in reality. Do not set them outside of reality. Understand what you're dealing with on a personal level to you versus a personal level to the person this is, for want of a better word, aimed at. Because if you've not got realistic expectations on both parts, it's going to fail. And that's often a hard, bitter lesson to learn as an individual, that no matter what you try, things just are the way they are. That's all I got for you, Kelsey.
I love it, Paul. Thank you. I was also just gonna ditto that with Paul. I 1000% agree with Paul. I was gonna touch on it later, but he did a really good job of it for me. I ditto everything he says about narcissists. I've yet to be successful with mine either. And mine's my mother. The longest I've had a spell work for her is the one that's currently going, and I'm on 2.5 years, and it is constant maintenance every day, and it's part of why I needed a break a couple weeks ago because it really needed some maintenance. So yeah, I ditto everything he said with narcissists. It's hard. I have yet to be fully successful. I have yet to do it, and I've done every option that I can think of. So yes, I wanted to ditto that. In the chat, Morgan, could you leave the ending up to a higher power? So like the natural end of this. I'm not gonna say no because everybody has their own path and everything that you can do. I personally don't like that when it comes to like baneful magic, because baneful magic, you're really using your energy. And you want to I feel like you should be the one determining like when that stops. Because it's what's affecting you. But again, everybody has their own path. So if that's what you feel, I don't see why you couldn't. If somebody disagrees, you can totally chime in and say that too. That's totally fine. Um, yeah, so when it comes to you're dealing with an aggressive narcissist that tries to attack it, it's like Paul and I kind of just talked about, it's really, really difficult to get that to stop. I have my protection study guide that has a bunch of stuff in there. You could try, I don't really know, especially the neighbor. I do have a neighbor spell in here. And yes, Morgan, Paul, I'm gonna read that with Morgan. I just don't really know that one because narcissists are so hard. Dealing with an aggressive narcissist that tries to attack us with magic. I just wanted to check those. I don't. Yeah. Yeah, I would send me a DM if you need to, so we can kind of talk about like more specifics with that, because that's also gonna need more specifics on like what you could possibly do. And then my protection classes are gonna be really a lot better for that than this one. But yes, okay. I'm gonna jump back in the study guide, and I've kind of briefly talk about it, but if you really, really want a super detailed look, you can look at, my debate on white magic versus black magic, which I've talked about before. I don't personally believe that's a thing. But if you do believe it, white magic can be just as painful as black magic can. Paul, like I said, he gave a really great example of that. I have a couple other examples in here. Like for example, you can use magic to cheer somebody up after somebody close to them has died. But you're actually manipulating their grief, and you're actually manipulating possible trauma for them. And that can actually be much bigger detriment. So you may think that you're actually healing somebody, you're trying to help them, you're trying to cheer them up. But they actually need to be able to feel their negative emotions so that they can process trauma. Like you can't process trauma without feeling those negative emotions. So doing some type of spell to make them not feel that could actually be detriment to them. So, and some people would consider that white magic. I would consider that painful. You can do a white magic spell to heal somebody with cancer. But it may not necessarily like take away their pain, and like take away their pain. It may actually just prolong their suffering. It may just actually make their suffering go longer. You may think that you're trying to heal somebody of cancer, but they're still living in pain. They're still living with all of their side effects. You just prolong their suffering. Is that white magic and all good and no harm done to none? That doesn't sound like that to me. That sounds painful to me. So some examples on that of why white magic can also be considered black magic. I wholeheartedly, if you've been in my classes before, believe that we live in a world that exists in shades of gray. I believe that magic exists in shades of gray. I believe the multiverse exists in shades of gray. And really, a lot of times when you talk about white versus black, you really are talking about creation versus destruction. And you're talking about, one energy versus the other, negative versus positive in an energetic stance. That's how I view it. I view everything as a shade of gray. Everything's a blend of everything. That is how I view it. That there's just so many reasons for why. Um, and again, I also view it that way because, you know, some people just don't deserve to be saved, and some people, there's no excuse for their terrible behavior. Some have become addicted to drugs and alcohol, and they need a really, really hard push to get sober. So you do baneful magic for that. And some people would say you're manipulating them, but are you manipulating for the better or not? So it's really, again, all morality. Magic is beneficial and it works based on your intentions. So that's when it comes down to the magic line. It's all about your intentions. I don't believe that magic is neither inherently good nor evil. Personally, I don't believe that. Again, there's a lot of different thoughts on that. Some people do believe that, some people don't. You have to wrestle with that. You have to figure out how you feel, how you believe that. But this is another reason why working with baneful magic is important, because magic isn't inherently good or evil. It's a caster, it's the intention, it's the impact, it's all of that. I again wholeheartedly believe all magic can be good for what people can be used for what people consider good and what people consider evil. I don't like using those words. If you've been in my classes, I really hate using those words. I prefer to use wanted versus unwanted. So I'm going to do a really brief rundown just so I can get into some of the baneful magic here too. I want to get through this all for you. How to know if baneful magic has been used on you. Huge disclaimer. Each and every single one of these symptoms can also have an alternate cause that is absolutely not related to any type of baneful magic whatsoever. It could be something simply that bad things happen to us. Physical health, mental health. It is a long list. This list that I have here also is not a definitive like end all and be all. It doesn't mean that if this is happening, you're definitely having baneful magic used against you. Baneful magic also isn't not used as often as like TVs and movies and social media portrays. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy to do it. And most practitioners that do it, they're not going to just use that energy and waste it and use it all the time. And they physically can't. They energetically can't just willy-nilly throw it around. And again, I say most. I don't say all, because there are people that I've talked about will just randomly throw it out for literally no reason. How they energetically do it, I don't know. But there are people that are like that. I went through phases where I was like that too. I didn't do it as often as I've heard some people, but so again, disclaimer, everything can possibly have another explanation. I really, really, really wanted to emphasize this because I keep hearing way too often that just because something bad happened to me, there must be a hex, there must be a curse, somebody's being baneful to me. Somebody put the evil on. No, that not everything has a magical explanation, but these are possible things that could be signs that you have baneful magic being used against you. An inexplicable illness or injury, a string of bad luck and misfortune, reoccurring nightmares, dreams, or bad omens, sharp objects, broken glass, you just randomly breaking things, sharp objects breaking around you. Your spirits or spirit guides or ascended masters or deities that you work with, they have instincts and intuitions and the warnings going off for you, letting you know. They're telling you, they're giving you signs, they're communicating with you that way. Sudden emotional instability, negative thoughts. This is if this is not something that you regularly experience. I really want to emphasize that, especially as somebody who has borderline personality disorder. I have DID, I have OCD, I have bipolar disorder. I can have erratic emotional instability and negative thoughts. So just because I have them, I don't automatically assume that somebody is doing baneful work against me. Next thing is sudden breakups and broken relationships. Again, a string of things or one just like really, really out of nowhere. But again, it doesn't always mean that. Sometimes people just break up with you out of nowhere. Feelings that you're being watched, like this nonstop feeling that you're being watched sometimes is another one. If you want to know another way to know, because I get asked this question a lot, egg cleansing, super, super great way to figure that out. No, I talked about this in detail when I went through my protection class, so you can definitely watch that. Otherwise, I put my section from that study guide also in this study guide, so it's in two places now for you. It's here in the Baneful Magic and it's in the protection study guide. So you can go over that if you would like. I'm not going to do that now because I didn't want this class to be about protection. Because I've already covered 2 entire classes of that. In the study guide, I also put the link to my protection study guide if you don't have it or if you need another place to get a hold of it. Okay, so types of baneful magic. We have binding, banishing, cursing, hexing, freezing, return to sender, jinxing, and severing. That's what I'm covering in here. There are a lot of other ways to do baneful magic. That's what I have in here today. Types of binding. Binding is the equivalent act of like a restraining order or somebody who is literally like entering a scary or troublesome realm. And so it's literally like you're restraining somebody. You're binding them, you're tying them up away from you. It's that's the analogy that I wanted to give for that. Because for this, I'm trying to give analogies that will help have it, because these are sometimes confusing to keep straight. So banishing is pretty much like the equivalent of either like a relocation program or a jail sentence. It's literally you are sending them away. You are having them contained. You are literally like annihilating like that presence. Like you are annihilating having anything to do with that. Like it is a banishment. Like it is an action that like they are gone. Cursing is to punish somebody for causing grievous harm. Cursing is usually a little bit more intense when it comes to out of like cursing, hexing, or jinxing. Cursing is like usually the more intense one. Hexing, these spells will send negative energy towards your target, but the hex won't last super long. Cursing, the main difference between cursing and hexing, cursing is usually a little bit more long-lived. It's usually more for also a last resort reaction action, but they're usually a lot more long-lived. I've heard of curses that can be generations. I've heard of curses that can go to bloodlines. Have that's a whole thing too. That I could go on a whole tangent on. So that they're a little bit more long-lived than hexing. Usually hexes won't last super long. Usually they have like a definitive end, and it's usually like a target. Freezing. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a spell that utilizes the freezer in your home or any type of freezing capabilities to technically form a binding. So freezing is technically a form of binding. It's just become so popular that I kind of like pulled it out of binding a little bit to kind of like pull it out. It's become really popular. I personally love using freezing. I personally really, really love using freezing spells. And I know a lot of practitioners that do. There's also return to sender spells, which are also known as karmic retribution. These are technically considered baneful, guys. A lot of people would argue and say they're not, but technically, if you really, really look at it, those are baneful. Like you're causing harm to somebody else. Like you're causing harm. So return to sender, it returns the harm done to you right back to its sender and gives you justice. Also on this, I'm going to touch on it a little bit more a little bit later, but there's a couple different thoughts on this. Some people feel like you can't return to sender something that wasn't actually sent to you, and some people feel like you can. I personally fall underneath the lines like if you do a return to sender spell to somebody and they didn't actually send you any like unwanted energy, they didn't actually like impact you in a harmful way, like you have nothing to send back to somebody. Like there's just nothing to send back if nothing was sent to you. I don't some again, there is difference in that though. Some people do believe that. Paul, did I hear you unmute yourself?
Yes, unfortunately you did.
Go ahead.
Okay. This is going to be a real quick one. And it relates to a lot of the stuff I see on TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook.
Yep.
To all persons, known or unknown. Really? Just really? On a return to spender. To all persons, known or unknown. That one phrase will cause you more grief and more hassle than anything you will ever do. Please, 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 please stop using that term when you're doing return to sender. Thank you very much.
I love you, Paul. Melissa, go ahead.
I just had a comment on the freezer and the return to sender.
Yes.
Sometimes for the freezer, when your intention is to stop a particular behavior, you can actually freeze that behavior so that behavior continues.
Yep.
So they're basically stuck in that perpetual behavior. And then the other one for return to sender, commenting on kind of like what Paul was saying, sort of maybe. Sometimes we can jinx ourselves. And when you do a return to sender, it's almost like amplifying that jinx or that you have placed on yourself. So it definitely can backfire. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I totally agree. I
100%.
100% agree with you.
100%.
Yep. I've had time. Yep. Yep. Michelle, go ahead.
Well,
okay. Go ahead.
When I did a freezer spell, it seemed to work out perfectly for me, for that aspect, but it had to do with family members. And I also had an incident where I didn't know a demon was attached to me, and it followed me for many, many years. And then when I met my first gray witch, she was on the phone with me and she was like, "Oh my God, you got a demon there." And I'm like, "What?" And then she put her son on the phone. He said the same thing. And then my sister, who did not know this person, and she still doesn't know this person. She called me up later on that day, was very ill, and said, "You got a demon attached to you." So when basically that's the backstory. So when we banished the demon, we banished it back to its sender, and nothing came back at us.
Interesting. That's a super interesting story. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next one we have is jinxing. So jinxing is usually just an annoyance. It's not really a huge harm. It's usually short-lived and it has a job to fulfill. It fulfills it and it's done. And then you have severing. It's also considered baneful magic, aka cord cutting. It's meant to cut, sever, or break a bond. And like I said, cord cutting is an example. So we'll get into cursing now. So cursing, the types of curses, there are quick curses. There are curses that are super, super elaborate, and then there are some that are really, really fast, like quicker to do. It doesn't take a lot of time. And you can literally have them in your back pocket and just pull them out whenever you need to. Spitting is a powerful form of cursing. It takes some effort to work up enough saliva, but you can actually spit on somebody and be able to curse while doing that. And you can do that by putting your energy into it. You can have words coming out while you're spitting, and it's also just the symbolism of spitting as well. Hold on. And then the next thing is the evil eye. I'm probably gonna pronounce this wrong. If you can pronounce it right, you can totally unmute yourself and totally correct me. The malachia, so it's usually crossed or the eye biting. It's a very common spiritual affliction. Some version of this phenomenon is known in nearly almost every single culture. It even makes its appearance in the Bible. The evil eye is an unintentional curse. I want to make that very clear. It's unintentional. It's a very important point. It's almost always unintentional, I should say. There's very specific approaches to be able to remove it because when the evil eye happens, that person has the ability to feel strong negative emotions, typically envy or jealousy, and also anger. It intensifies negative energy to be projected onto that person, and they'll feel incredibly negative with that being projected onto them. Some symptoms of this condition are usually a headache, usually fatigue, usually feeling foggy, usually feeling, you end up becoming prone to clumsiness and dropping things. But getting rid of it is actually super, super simple. It's just like cleansing bath and then making sure you're cleansing yourself afterwards. There's also verbal curses. So there's quick verbal curses that are super easy and effective. There's so Many. There is endless common sayings, common phrases. You can make up your own that come from so many different cultures throughout the history of magic and witchcraft. Irish has quite a few, like the Irish is very particularly well known for this. Some that you may find are may you find the bees but not the honey, the crows curse on you, may the cat eat you, and then may the devil eat the cat. May all your bacon burn. So those are some examples of some traditional ones that I've come across and I've actually also used. You can also do written curses. Some of these curses can fall under, quick or long, kind of depending on how you do written curses. There's also quite a few different ways that you can do written curses. So it's writing an ill intent on a slip of paper. You can stash it near or on your target in order to have pure and excellent results. Another form of doing this is that you can write them. You can create curse sigils and put them onto things. You can put them on sticky notes near them. You can put them by them. You can create sigils that will activate when they're broken, and you put it on their car window that's dirty, and then when they clean it off, it gets broken. There's so many different things that you can do for written curses. You can also write, just with 2 words. You can do a whole sentence. You can do a whole big long thing. If you know your target specific name, there are a lot of ways that you can get really, 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 really creative with that. You can write down their name on the bottom of your foot and you're cursing them as if you're walking on them every single time, everywhere you walk, you're stepping on them. You can write their name in an undesirable location, like a toilet seat, a car tire, a dumpster, anything like that. And that can also activate as a curse if you set that intention that way. For quick curses, you have long form curses, and long form curses are what most people think of when they think about curses. They take an incredible amount of time. They take a lot of energy. They're generally incredibly well thought out and planned. They often require us to get materials for casting. They often require us to prep. They often require certain moon phases, certain days, certain times, depending on your magic and your practice. A lot of forms typically use some type of tag lock, which if you don't know what a tag lock is, that is something that will actually connect you to that person in a spell, like their hair or toenail or saliva or a photo or any, a memento from a memory that you had with each other. Anything like that can be considered a tag lock. This,
Kelsey,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. With regard to taglock,
Yeah.
I just want to point something out. Like you say, it could be a photo. That could include a post you have done on social media. That
Yes.
works as a perfect taglock, folks.
Yes, you can just pull it right up on your phone. Super convenient. Thank you for
And if
putting
you
that
do it on
out
your
there.
phone, it's behind a black mirror too.
Yes, yes, you could do that. Yes. Good point. Okay. Often as well with cursing, your words, your materials, your actions, like when it comes to long form cursing, they all assist you with directing your intention, your willpower. So it's very specific what you pick out. You need to be intentional of the items that you pick so that it's directing your intention and it's directing your willpower. It's often cursing is also a very highly emotional endeavor. It's a very, very emotional. Usually for me, I don't know if it is for Paul. He can say if it is or not if he wants to, but usually for me, like cursing is very highly emotional because of what's attached to it. Because I'm usually doing it, I'm actually almost always doing it because of harm done to me or somebody I care about. And so it's always very highly emotional for me. So again, that shadow work is so important to make sure that you're in the right emotion when you're doing this, when you're setting your intention, when you're making sure that magic is set correctly.
I'm with you 100% on that. And just to further emphasize what you were saying, the last bit of Baneful work that I did took almost 3 weeks in planning. Um, and I was out of commission for, I would say, at least a week and a half. Um, but as you say, being in that frame of mind, super important. There's no point in trying to you know, to put a mirror to it. There's no point in trying to get a curse on somebody if you're laughing and joking.
Right.
That's a joyous emotion.
Right.
Unless, like me, you do the evil laugh, in which case it's like, you know.
So
But
clearly you can hear me. I sound like an Oompa Loompa, I'm told. Sorry. So I know it's Flitch Day.
you're not an Oompa
Not
Loompa. You're not an Oompa Loompa. I promise.
that Let's see. Okay, so object-bound curses. Object-bound curses are the type that I actually run into most frequently, believe it or not, which is weird where I'm located. But these curses are actually, instead of being directed at a particular person, they're usually attached to an object, and they follow that object around, affecting whoever comes into contact with it. There's so many shows about these too, like so many shows about these. I actually come across them a lot, like when I'm at Savers or when I'm in a thrift shop or an antique shop or a lot of witchy shops too that have like secondhand stuff. I come across it actually a lot. Object-bound curses are often actually unintentional. They're items that are often through some twist of fate or extreme emotion or traumatic event. That energy gets tied to it and it carries those energies with it. That actually ends up bleeding that negative energy out to anybody who picks it up and use it. You also can obviously make intentional object bound curses as well. Like that obviously is something that you can do as well, like puppets. People, I've heard it said both ways. But puppets are a perfect example of that. But a lot of times, like when it comes to like these objects, these kinds of spirits, they're rarely in a good place. These objects are rarely in a good place. They're usually reliving like their worst traumas on a loop. They're lashing out at other people. Just if you come across an item like with this, just be really, really intentional with it. Clean it, cleanse it, try to soothe it. If there's anything that you can do to help release any of the curse in the soul, you do what you can with those objects. But I did want to touch on those just because, there's so many freaking paranormal shows about them that you kind of can't not talk about curses without talking about objects that have curses on them. But things, like I said, they also have a tendency to move and change hands, and there's going to be more energy grabbing onto that. And it's just, that's with those objects, that's okay. That's kind of all I wanted to say on that. But like I said, you can do them. Puppets are a great way. I'll probably talk about it next time, but so what I had in here, actually, did I just jump my study guide? I did. Interesting. Huh. Hold on, guys. I'm looking here, looking here to see what I did. Oh no, I see what I did. Okay. So now we're in a hexing. Does anybody have any questions on curses? I don't actually have a lot of examples of curses for you in the study guide because curses are really personal. Sorry, I got distracted by chat for a second. Curses are typically really personal. If you want more like stuff on that, I can try to create something for you guys with that, but they're just really personal, I feel. I don't know if Paul agrees with me on that, and that's he can totally chime in if he wants to. But yeah, I just feel like they're super personal, which is why I didn't give a lot of examples there. I gave you the basic work of how to do it, but I didn't like write anything out for you. So, does anybody have any questions on it? I don't see anything in the chat and I don't see any hands raised. Fabulous. Okay. Next part is hexing. Like I talked about, like some people actually like intertwine. I'm so confused with my study guide right now. It's not making sense to me. I totally did this in wrong order. I'm gonna jump around actually. It looks like I re-edited some pages in the wrong order. So this is literally not making sense to me. Oh, those are spells, those are curses I put in there for you that I'm looking at. Haha, that's what it is. That's why I'm so confused. Why did I call it that? Why did I call a curse a hex? Okay, well, this is a curse for your ex, by the way, guys. Thank you for bearing with me while I realize what I did to myself in my study guide. So I have a curse for your ex in there because it's typically what people ask me about is their exes. So I have one in there that breaks it down for you. Now it makes so much sense what I have going on here. Oh, whew. Sorry guys. I'm so sorry I confused myself. The next I have is is a curse for an enemy. Specific enemy. So I do have actually a couple basic ones in here, but again, I do believe they're actually really, really personal. So again, make sure that you do that. And there's one for cursing somebody for like literally just being ruthless. It's a pretty out there one. Okay, so next round of freezing. Now I'm so sorry guys. I feel, why did I do this to myself? I don't like my words there. I'm gonna have to fix it. Okay, so freezing. I have an example in here of one that uses words for you to use if you'd like to take a look at it. Quite a few examples. So first, what is a freezer spell? Like I said, exactly what it sounds. It utilizes the freezer in your home or uses freezing capabilities. There's actually a really long history about it when it comes to ice boxes and the swirled freezer. They actually claim that the fact that ancient humans learned how to freeze food for preservation is one of our most important like discoveries and things that we started to do so that we can be able to cook and use fire and to be able to have people live in colder climates, to be able to preserve our food throughout the winter. It was a super, super, super crucial advancement that we had in human history to be able to actually like come up with that skill and start using it. So it's been important for forever. Forever. So how do freezer spells work? Freezer spells work in a few ways. So first, the freezer essentially does what it's supposed to do. Freezes things. It preserves it. It locks it in. But when you think about all the different various intentions for freezer spells, there's so many different things that you can do. You can be locking somebody in. You could do a freezer spell and lock it in and then have it be activated once it unthaws as well. That's something that I've done as well with freezer spells. So that is another way that you can look at it. How it works, you're really, really preserving that magic. You're preserving that energy. Like you're really tying it. You're harnessing it in there. It's the same, like I love to use, well, I do freezer jar spells, but it's kind of hard because you have to use really thick mason jars so they don't break. Can't use thin ones. I've had a few break in the freezer on me. So let's see. So an example that I have in here for when you can do them. So let's say that you have a coworker who's made it a really hostile work environment for you. Actually even sometimes fearful for your life. You've gone to your boss, they've absolutely done nothing. And then you can actually do a freezer spell because it's considered a binding spell. So that's an example of when you can use it. It will work, and then you consider the length of time because you can either take it out of this, like I said, you can take it out and let it thaw, or you can keep it in indefinitely. And then it stayed in there indefinitely. But you do have to go back to them. I will say that you do have to go back to freezer spells. You do have to rework them. You do have to re-add to them as well. Let's see. Another thing that you can do with them as well, Melissa touched on it. People have used it for behaviors. I personally haven't done this yet because of what Melissa touched on. Is because you can actually really unintentionally end up locking that behavior in there and in your life instead of freezing it out of your life if you're not very, very, very careful of that intention. Because I've also seen people use freezer spells, like I said, to preserve and lock something in and to preserve and lock something out. And the let it out is usually like the defrost method. But when you completely lock something in, you never take that jar out. A lot of times you end up preserving that habit. You can preserve that habit. You can preserve that thing in there. I've seen people do it as a love spell. I personally don't agree with doing non-consensual love spells as binding. Everybody has their own personal preference on that and their own personal beliefs on that. That also will have to do with your morality. I personally don't agree with that, but I have seen people and I have heard of people doing freezer spells for a non-consensual love binding spell. So that's another way to look at that, another example as well. But there are endless intentions for freezer spells. But most of the intentions that I find are to bind a person or a situation. Most of the times, that's what people are using this for. So you can use it to preserve love. You can use it to preserve friendship, to job opportunity. You can use it to stop time from moving too fast. If you think your child's going to, I don't agree with doing this, but I've heard that they will do it to try to like slow down their child growing up. Again, I don't agree with that, but it is something it can be used with. You can use it to preserve one's health. You can bind with inside of a freezer spell a dangerous person or situation. When you use the ice, when you use the defrost, you can use the ice to promote spells of stillness, and the defrosting can actually help promote growth as well. Self-control, focus and concentration, learning how to adapt to abrupt change, extreme purification. I've also used freezer spells in god and goddess dedication rituals myself personally as well. Ingredients that you can use for these. It's you can get super, super creative and super, super, super fun with it. The two main ingredients though are water, because it's gonna end up freezing itself, and then a container to have it in. Something that it can be contained in. There are times to where you can put absolutely nothing in that freezer spell besides water, your energy, and your tent. There are other times where you can have other ingredients like herbs, flowers, fruits, salt. You can add like other, I've even actually crystals that are able to be in water. I've put a few crystals in there when I've when I've defrosted them, they shattered, but that was fine. I was done with what they needed. But I actually have not done that as well. I've also like typically I myself and a lot of people, they'll write a person's name or a situation on a piece of paper and then put it inside the water as well to freeze it. You can write out a spell and put a spell inside of it to freeze it with it. You can create a sigil and put a sigil inside of it to freeze it with it. You can also use an ice cube tray to freeze herbs and flowers and other ingredients into it, and then add those to spells, potions. You can add them to your drinks or your teas. That's another way to actually use freezer magic as well. You can put it in your kitchen stuff. You can also add black salt into them for a purifier. You can add so many things. So many things. There's just so many things, endless things. Um, when it comes to what you can put inside those freezer spells. I have some examples inside of the study guide for you, of freezing out specific people, and how you can do that. When you set a freezer spell, typically when I set a freezer spell, I always make sure everybody has their own verbiage and their own words for it. So whether you're going into sacred space, creating your energetic container, going into your sacred temple, dropping in, going into a meditative state, passing, whatever it is that you do to get into that space, make sure that you're in that space, make sure you're calling in that energy. Sometimes you can use a candle to be able to set it. Sometimes you don't have to. You can use incense. Everybody's going to have, it's going to be specific to your practice, but make sure that you're setting that energy, you're setting that intention. You call that into that space, you call it into that water, you call it into those ingredients that you have in there, you call that intention into there, and then you make sure that when you're sealing it, you seal it energetically. You can seal it with words, you can seal it with a mantra, you can seal it with sound. And then also there are times where I even seal my freezer spells with wax on top and a sigil on top. So you can add that layer to it as well, but you don't have to. Freezer spells can be as intricate as you want it to be and as simple as you want it to be. I do have some examples also in here. There's a lemon freezer spell because adding lemons to it is fabulous. Lemons have been used in many magical traditions for hundreds of years. They're linked to the moon. They're linked to divine femininity. They're linked to the water. They're also inherently a purifying energy. And then some people also like straight up don't like the taste or anything with lemons and the sour and they grimace. And it's like that can also like sour that spell and enhance that for you. Okay, I also have a freezer spell in here to stop danger, if you'd like to take a look at that. So, before we go into return to sender spells, do we have any questions on freezing spells?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, if I may.
Go for it.
Okay. I'm going to cover two things here, one of which I'll bitch about later. And yes, I did just use that word. If you are putting water into a container, please be aware water expands when it freezes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, what was your other point?
You can also.
Oh, that's a whole different subject, Kelsey.
Okay,
One that
sounds
would
good.
take up 5 hours of my time.
Okay, sounds good.
You can also use zipper lock bags.
Yep, I've had some people use those too. I've used a couple times. It's always whatever container is going to be safe for you to use to freeze and something that you're able to freeze. And then a lot of people always wrap it in aluminum foil as well, so they know that that's what it is. Also, it just adds to it as well.
You can also make it, I don't know if you have this in your study guide, but you can also use vinegar.
Yep. That I totally agree with that. Okay, let's see. So we have Return to Sender spells now. The Return to Sender spell is a powerful tool that allows you to redirect negative energy back to its source. You do it by harnessing the energy of the universe, yourself, whatever your beliefs are. Everybody has their own beliefs with that. And you can send negative vibrations back to the sender, ensuring that they don't have any impact on you. The spell acts as a shield and it protects us from harmful intentions and ill wishes of others. It creates a barrier around us. It also can be seen as being reflective of negative energy and preventing anybody from entering our energetic space. By returning any unwanted or negative energy to its source, we restore balance and harmony within our lives. Typically, Return to Sender spells is not about seeking revenge or causing harm to others. It's about protecting others and reclaiming our power. It allows us to set boundaries and establish a safe and positive environment around us. And I said typically, because if you really, really look at it, if you are even if you're sending something back to somebody, even if they send it to you first, you're still causing harm, which is why this is considered baneful. You're still technically causing harm to somebody, even if they send it to you first. Like this, for me, this is the tip for the tap. This is the tip for tap. This is the tip for tap spell. This is the tip for tap back and forth. I'm sending it back to you. This is karma. This is what this is. I have a couple different examples in here for you for return to sender spells that you can use. A great way to do this is using a mirror. The mirrors are super, super fabulous for this. Some say that you have to put a black candle in front of the mirror. Some say that you don't. It's going to be based on your personal preference. And like Paul had talked about earlier, I personally, hopefully I didn't accidentally include it in here because I did this really fast. But I personally agree with him. I don't like doing return to senders to things that are unknown and to anything that I may possibly not know. I don't like that. That leaves that so wide open, and I don't like that. Like Paul talked about earlier. So try to not do that. There are so many different ways you can do return to sender spells. You can use lemons, you can use candles, you can use mirrors, you can use just energy. There are so many ways you can do return to sender spells. So just take a look at all of them. And again, keep in mind, they're literally meant to send back what has been sent to you. I personally don't think that you can send something back that wasn't sent to you. Again, there are different thoughts on that. Okay, I'm gonna jump into banishing next. So banishing, different ways that you can banish. You can burn by writing the name of the thing you want to rid yourself of or the situation and burn it. You can spread the
Excuse me.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, real quick. I just want to say for any nerds out there, the Return to Sender kind of sounds like the Reflect Pokemon defense attack, basically.
Yeah. 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 I'll agree with that, honey.
Okay, just that was
love
like
it.
the first thing that came to my mind. So
I absolutely love it.
sorry for the interruption.
Oh, you're good. Um, so, and then you can spread the ashes to the wind. You can bury them however you choose to like to get rid of ashes. I personally, these are the one ashes I don't keep when I make black salt. These are the one ashes I actually do discard is when I use ashes for banishing. Um, you can banish through bathing. That's taking a clearing or cleansing bath. You can banish through breaking. You can take an object that represents that foul situation and break it or smash it to get rid of it for once and for all. You can brush it away. You can also banish it by boundaries. That's energetic, that's visualization, that's actually creating boundaries. I did a lot of work a lot of this in my protection study guide. So you can take a look at that too. Banishing. When someone says they're performing a banishing ritual, it means that they want to eradicate or annihilate something from their lives. That's completely get rid of. Like completely. It's to cast, it's to remove. There's no like if wishy-washies, like this, it is you do not want this person, you do not want this entity. It is a one and done, like you are getting rid. It's stopping the causing harm, whether it's harm to you personally, to your property or your loved ones. It's getting rid of unwanted people, things, energy. It can encompass all of that. Some people consider these, and I've heard people call them go away spells as well. If you want to use that verbiage, I don't really like that, but everybody to each their own. How you perform a banishing ritual is absolutely entirely up to you. There are so many ways to banish. There are so many ways to get rid of something or someone. My first tip is to use what you have on hand. You don't need to go out and spend a ton of money to be able to do something like this or to have it be super fancy. You can also use nothing. You can use just your energy and you yourself. You can have something as simple as just a handful of salt and a black candle. You can have something super intricate. I have some banishing chants in the study guide that you can definitely look at. What happens if a banishing doesn't work? If one banishing ritual doesn't seem to work, just try something else. Try it on a different day. Try it during a different moon phase. Make sure that your intentions were actually set correctly. Make sure you actually had self-confidence in yourself. You had self-confidence in your intuition. You trusted your powers. You trusted that when you were doing that. Sometimes it just may simply be that banishing wasn't the right type of spell that you needed to do. It could have been that you needed to do a binding or a severing or a hex breaking or something else. So if it doesn't work, like those are some things to look at. When you should perform a banishing spell, the best time to perform a banishing spell is during the waning moon, which is when it's getting darker again, and the heavens start to make the return from the new moon, and fates and all of that. It's a perfect cycle for cutting ties with someone, which is really what banishing is, in a sense. Yes, but more extreme. Sometimes the energy, like it's just really ready to be able to boost it during that time. When it comes to banishing, you can also banish using herbs. There's a lot of really powerful banishing herbs that you can use. I have a list of them and why and like all the attributes with them in the study guide. But some that you can use are going to be basil, black pepper, cedar, cumin, dragon's blood. You have garlic, hot pepper, mandrake, sage is even used for banishing, onion, oak, rosemary, thistle, thorns, wolfsbane, yarrow. If any of these also though are poisonous, because you can also use poisonous plants and herbs as well, please use those safely. Do your research. Don't do that willy-nilly. Please be safe. That is my disclaimer every time any of that ever gets brought up. Okay, in the study guide, I have quite a few different ways that you can do banishing rituals in your home. You can use a smoke cleanse. You can use an herb, like smoke cleansing with an herbal bundle. There's also banishing oil, and there's other measures of protection that you can use by using banishing herbs to draw a circle around your home. I have that in there for you. There's also in there for specific spirit banishing, because I get asked that a lot. That's what people typically want to banish, is spirits from their home or unwanted entities from their home. So I do have that in there for you as well. There's banishing oils that you can use. I have one to banish your ex, because that's something I really get asked about a lot, is banishing your ex. You just want them gone. You can also banish illnesses. You can again, disclaimer with that one. This should not replace medical advice from a licensed healthcare provider. This is not an end-all and be-all for all illnesses. This is not some miracle cure. I want to make sure that this disclaimer is there with that. So please, when it comes to banishing illnesses, like it's not like this big, huge end-all and end-all be-all thing. It's not this big miracle thing. So please keep that in mind. When it comes to that with banishing. Ways for using, okay, I think that's all banishing. I'm gonna pop back into the chat before I get into binding here quick. I really just don't want to go too long for you guys. Otherwise, we might just have to, some of this might have to go to the next class. It's already getting kind of late. How do you guys feel about that? You guys want to stop here and then I pick up with binding and I just shift my schedule a week? Because yeah, it's almost 10. I was worried this was going to happen because of the morality part of it, but I did not want to skip that. I did not want to just talk about types of baneful magic and how to do it. I did not want to do that. That felt irresponsible to me. So that's, I wanted to make sure to cover that. Okay, do we have any questions, any comments, anything that I said that anybody disagrees with that they want to talk with me about now before we head out? And again, like I said, I'm just gonna reshift my whole schedule and we'll do Baneful Magic Part 2 next week. Honey, go ahead.
Okay, I was actually gonna wait to ask this, but with my head, I will probably forget.
Okay.
With the what's the thing that came after? 1 second. Thing that came after something severing that it's like cord cutting. Okay, I am not an insta witch. All right, I don't go there with me. I'm not one of them. However, I am a witch, and I did go on Instagram for a while for books and that. But point is, I have seen spells where you like write someone's name on a piece of toilet paper and then flush it, and that's a form of cord cutting. I feel like that just like baneful, just kind of mean. Like you're
I,
like you're flushing that person down the toilet like they're a piece of, well, you get it. So I just feel like that's just mean.
yeah, I
Thoughts?
personally would not consider that a cord cutting. I that's interesting. Um, I would not consider that. I mean, I would maybe consider that like maybe like maybe a quick curse, maybe a hex, but not a cord. What do you think, Paul?
Curse slash hex.
Yeah, that's what I would
I
say.
know I know the exact thing that she's talking about. I've seen it online, but I've also okay, this is probably going to make a couple of people uncomfortable. But again, it falls into this realm. The use of bodily fluids and other things um, does, in some practices, in some practitioners' practice, play a part of that.
Yep.
Um, so, but to me, that would not be a cord cutting. That would be more like a binding, I guess, because you're attaching one thing to the other.
Yeah, I could see that too. I could see that too.
But to me, that would be more of a curse or a hex, probably a hex.
That's what I was leaning towards because it's a little bit more short-lived.
Yeah, I mean, it's a one and done excuse to harm.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that one though, Sonny, so thank you for bringing that to my attention. I have not heard of that one. I have not seen that one.
Oh, thank you guys for clarifying it a bit more.
Yeah, you are welcome. Okay, anybody have anything else they want to comment, argue with me on, ask questions about before we head out for the night?
Morgan has a question in chat.
Oh, did I miss it? Morgan, what did I miss? Oh, do you use spell books or do you have any that you that is a that is a complicated answer. Um, yes and no. It depends on the practice I'm pulling from. It depends on the intention I'm pulling from. And then it also depends on, yeah. There's a lot of times where I will start with a framework of a spell from a spell book and then I take it and adjust it where it's needed for myself. There are other times to where I don't use a spell book at all. I don't use any type of incantation books. I don't use any type of invocation books, nothing like that. So it's yes or no. I do have some that I can recommend, and I can create a cheat sheet on that for you if you'd like. I bet you Paul probably has some too. But again,
I'll plead the fifth.
it really depends on the practice I'm pulling from. Sorry, Paul, I cut you off. I apologize.
I said I'm going to plead the fifth.
Going to plead the fifth. Okay. You can plead the fifth. Okay. Yeah, because it's everybody's practice is super different. And I personally, I don't, it really depends on the practice. I usually prefer doing my own though. But everybody again has their own beliefs in that. Okay, any other questions, comments, anything else like that? Okay, I don't think I see anybody. Fabulous. Okay. It was my intention to get through this whole study guide tonight, but we did not get there. And I'm really actually happy that we didn't because I really wanted to make sure we talked about the morality. So thank you so much for being here with me guys tonight. Thank you as well for being so incredibly respectful and kind, and nobody like was rude to anybody. There wasn't any gatekeeping. So I really, really appreciate that. Thank you for having that open mind. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate that, guys. So again, my entire schedule is going to shift a week. So we will do Baneful Magic Part 2 next week. So we will finish this study guide, and I'll probably have another one for you. There's a couple more practices I wanted to talk about that didn't make it into this one.
Kelsey, just a quick word to you personally. Do you want to shift it 1 week or 2?
Ooh, you're right, because I need to be alternating. When I don't, my energy gets so out of whack. Okay, guys, I'm shifting it. I'm gonna shift it 2 weeks. Paul's completely right. So whatever I'm doing 2 weeks from now, unless it's sex magic, I don't want
It's sex magic.
I don't want to push that anymore.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too.
Okay, Paul. I thank you for pointing it out. I'm gonna really think about it. I may just have to have this be it's Baneful Magic 2 be a bonus class. Okay, guys, I'm gonna think about it.
Question?
I've pushed sex magic like 3 times, and people really, really want that class.
Yes.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
If you're alternating between, for lack of a better way to put it, dark and light,
Yep.
would sex magic really be considered dark or baneful or?
You
I
know
mean,
what?
it's a taboo subject, yeah, but I would think you get a lot of pleasure from it.
You do.
So, I
You know
mean, I
what,
would think that'd
honey?
be
You
more of
are
a.
giving me a lot to think about and contemplate because I probably won't have to.
Or if nothing else, just kind of like a neutral.
I might actually just flip-flop them then. We might just do sex magic next week and then do Baneful Magic 2.0 the week after.
That sounds like a winner.
I'll just do that. I'm gonna flip-flop them. So we'll do sex magic next week, and then we'll do Baneful Magic Part 2 the week after. So watch for that schedule to change because I really don't want to push sex magic again. People are literally begging for this one.
Thank you so much. You are awesome as usual.
Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. I appreciate it so much. Have a good rest of your evening, guys.
Have a good night.
Good night, all.